Welcome back to part 2 of boat equipment and systems. In this video, we will look at safety, water, head, and galley systems. There are two compelling reasons to have good safety equipment on board your boat. First of all, it's mandatory. Much of the equipment is mandatory in order to take the boat out. But more importantly, it's self-preservation. We want your own personal safety is important, that you're able to come back and sail another day. Life jackets are mandatory for every person on boat. In addition to, also we need a whistle, and often there are strobe lights attached to the life jackets in case you're overboard at night, and then you can make it easier to see with a strobe light flashing, make it easier to find the person in the water. Because once a person is in the water, it's very hard to find them. On our last trip to the BVIs, we had an incident where we had to go help another boat that was in trouble in the middle of the night in a big blow. And so we got out, the crew was getting into our little dinghy, and I wanted everybody to put on a life jacket. And these were orange life jackets, just like we've all disdained from, sailing here in the Midwest. But when I went to pull them out of the package and put them on, they had straps and stuff like that that were in all different places than I was typically used to putting on. And so what I would encourage you to do is that when you get your boat and you're doing the checkout, or take one of these orange life jackets out, try them on to make sure that they fit, and then put them away wherever they need to be. You want to store them. Lifelines are cables that are fastened to the stanchions on a boat, and they run from the bow to the stern to help keep you inside the boat. Now these are really our lifeline, or last protection of last resort. So in addition to a lifeline, we may also have a jack line that runs from the deck cleat in the bow all the way back. This is a rope or something like that where we can hook our tether into our harness so that if we're in really poor seas, bad seas, where the boat is rocking and rolling and bouncing, it'll help keep us inside the lifelines and not fall overboard. In case we have a man overboard, we should have a horseshoe or some other device that we can throw to a person when they go overboard to give them additional flotation. It's a good idea to practice the man overboard drill just a little bit so that you know how to do it. We'll certainly cover this in the sail class in the fall, as well as those people that have taken my intro to sailing class. We also talk about man overboard in that. Additionally, there's some additional equipment that we've got is a life raft. Each boat will have a dinghy that's small, inflatable with a motor on the back. And what that will do is we use that to get to shore, because we won't most likely spend overnights. We'll hook up to a mooring, and then we need some sort of vessel to get us from our boat to shore for dinner. And so our dinghies will do that. But if you're on a long cruise, you probably, in addition to your dinghy, will want a life raft. The top of this picture down in the slide is a picture of a life raft that's been mounted on the deck. And what it does, it has a self-inflator that you take it off in case an instance where your boat is going to sink. You can pull the life raft out, inflate it, and then have your equipment that's going to keep you, sustain you for several days or more until you're able to be rescued. So make sure that you've got a ditch bag and things like that, that's, if you're on a long cruise, to be able to put into the life raft in case your boat sinks. Now, I'm not expecting any of our BVI boats to sink because we're all close to shore. But if we were professional cruisers, that would be something that we would want to have a plan for. If you were to do extensive cruising, you would probably want to have some sort of personal indicator to let people know where you are actually out sailing. An emergency position indicating radio beacon, EPRB, is one kind of device. There are several others now that have been developed that are also satellite communications to let people on shore know where you are. This would be an important item. The EPRB is registered with NOAA, and it's for you personally. It can be either a personal unit or actually mounted on the boat. But remember, if you have an EPRB, it doesn't do any good unless it's registered with NOAA. To assist, since fiberglass boats are plastic, the radar indicators are not quite as, the plastic doesn't reflect the radar beams. And so what we might do is put a radar reflector up in the rigging. It's a round circle that has, it's aluminum, and it increases the reflectability, and it helps other boats, big boats like cruising ships and things like that, to see you, so they might be able to avoid you. And finally, standard on all boats is a bilge pump, so that if you do happen to get a hole in your boat, you can pump the water out while you figure out where the water is coming from and make the repairs. These bilge pumps probably can be both manual, where you operate like a pump with a handle, or they might be electric, and you probably have both. Fire extinguishers are mandatory on all boats with engines. There are 3 classes of fire extinguishers. The Class A is for wood and paper, Class B is for flammable liquids, Class C for electrical equipment. There are 2 different sizes. The small ones are 2 pounds and the larger ones are 10 pounds. A 2-pound fire extinguisher will only last for about 8 to 10 seconds, whereas a 10-pound will still last for less than a minute. So you have to be very efficient in how you use them. So if you have a fire, you need to use the PASS system, P-A-S-S. And what that stands for is pull the pin, aim the fire extinguisher at the base, sweep the nozzle, and side to side. On our cruising boat, we're going to also have tanks with water for drinking, cooking, and bathing. Now these tanks are fairly large, 150 gallons or so, and we need that to keep us. You'd think that with being in the middle of all that water that we would be not have a problem with drinking, but actually the salt water is not very useful for much on board the boat. So let's first of all look at drinking water. What we generally do with drinking is we actually buy bottled water in the gallon container as part of our provisioning effort. We figure about 2 gallons per person to start out with, and then when that gets near the end, then we buy some more at the next stop. We also use that bottled water for cooking. For bathing, we actually use the tanks that are in the boat. Boats come with 2 tanks generally, and what we start with is 1 tank, and then we keep running that one for showers and things like that until it's gone. That way we kind of know how much water we have left. It's a good indicator of saying, okay, when that one's down, okay, now we're halfway through our water supply, and we need to start considering when are we going to get our next tank full. When we're showering, we usually use a water economy type method. So first of all, we put the shower on, we get wet, turn the water off, soap up, get all our spots soapy, and then turn the water back on to rinse the soap off. The storage tanks on board are generally fixed. They need to be cleaned, and if they start getting fouled, then we may need to put some treatment in there. One type of treatment is a teaspoon of bleach to the 20 gallons of water, and then let it slosh around there a little bit, and then fill it, and then empty it out, rinse it out. We can also have our portable tanks if you were taking a long trip, and then our bottled water for drinking. Some boats, cruising boats, will have a desalinator to provide additional range for water. Our boats won't have anything like that, and if we're in a pinch doing a long cruise and ran out of water, we could capture the rainwater for use too. One of the positions on our boat when we go cruising is sanitation officer, and their job is to manage the head when we're in and out of the different marinas. The head has a holding tank for the waste, and then they have a Y valve for discharge. So the Y valve takes the stuff coming out of the toilet and either turns the Y valve, puts the discharge into a tank, or it pushes it out through an opening into the shore. Generally, what they do down in the BVIs is we want the Y valves to be pointed towards the tank when we're in the harbors, but then when we get out into the open water, to open the Y valves up to drain the tank down. When they go when we take the boat back, they want to have the Y valve open so that they know that you haven't plugged the toilet up at all. Now, one of the things that we'll want to make sure that they talk about is that when using the head, there's the rule is if it didn't go through you, it doesn't go in the head. So for toilet paper and things like that, we actually do not put that into the toilet. We put that in a Ziploc bag after we're done and then throw it away with the trash each day. In the BVIs, we really don't have that much of a restriction, but in some places that you might cruise are very, very tight on what they'll allow and won't even allow any discharge at all. In some of the parks up in the Great Lakes, that you actually have to show that your Y valve is sealed shut. In addition to having the standard heads that we'd find on these bigger boats, there's also portable toilets, which you can pick up and carry ashore and dump out that way. Also, we've got modern technologies where we've got composting toilets where actually it takes all and creates the waste into a compost pile that then can be taken ashore and put it, it's actually dirt then, and be dumped ashore. Finally, let's look at the galley. This is always near and dear to my heart because I like to eat good food. When we're provisioning our boat and we get all our supplies delivered to the boat in the BVIs, we'll have boxes full of material, goods to store below. And it always seems like that we've got more things than we have places to store it. So it will require some serious planning to put all our food and provisions away. On board, we'll have different, a stove that will be what we'll do our cooking on, and they'll have an oven. And there's various types of stoves that are on cruising boats. Ours are primarily going to be liquid propane, but there are other types that you might see on other cruising ships. We've got alcohol stoves. They were early on, those are the ones that were most prevalent. They're not very, they don't have very much heat, but they do the job. Liquid propane, which we're used to now, is there's a little trick that we have to pay attention to liquid propane. The gas is heavier than air in liquid propane, so that the gas, if you have a leak, it's going to sink to the bottom of the boat, which is not a safe place to have that stuff. And so when we're doing liquid propane stove, you'll turn on the tank, and then there'll also be a switch by the stove that you need to turn on that will also turn the tank on, and then you can do light the fire with a match or an igniter. The compressed natural gas is actually the safest approach. I don't see that too much because the fuel isn't readily available in a lot of places. But the reason it's safer is that the gas is lighter than air, and if you have any leakage, it's going to just disperse out the companionway and get off the boat. Diesel and kerosene are less desirable because they're difficult to light. Electric, you'll see out on some power boats, but not many sailboats. They're safest, but you need a generator in order to use the electric stove. These boats will also have refrigeration and ice boxes. The ice box, they actually are like a chest freezer where you open the lid from the top, so that keeps the coolness down below. What I generally do when I'm storing, when I'm doing the refrigerator, is I put a bag of ice in the bottom of the fridge, and then the refrigerator is running, but then I'll put the rest of our perishable goods in the refrigerator on top of that ice bag, and then that will tell me that in case we didn't run the engine long enough to keep our batteries charged enough to keep the refrigerator working, our food won't spoil. We might, we might have to change the ice bag, after a couple days or so, but it's not a small cost compared to losing the food that we have. Our fridge is really one of the biggest power draw on board, so we want to make sure that it keeps itself working. That finishes our chapter on boat systems. Please bring any questions you have to our next live video training session. At that time, we'll also go over the homework questions at the end of the chapter. So talk to you soon.